Have you ever wondered if the system designed to educate us might actually be the one that limits us the most? From the moment we're old enough to hold a pencil, we're placed inside rooms with walls, bells, and rules that promise to shape our minds. But what if that shaping is really a quiet form of control? Imagine it. You come into the world curious, alive, full of wonder. You want to touch everything, ask everything, feel everything. But then you're taught to sit still, to speak only when called upon, to trade wonder for worksheets. Day after day, year after year, that wild curiosity begins to fade, replaced by order, repetition, and quiet obedience. And yet, the most haunting truth is this. Many of the thoughts you carry, the dreams you abandoned, the anxieties you battle every day, may not even be yours. They were planted, shaped, and reinforced by a machine invisible to the naked eye. A system that tells you what to value, what to fear, what to chase. A system that praises your conformity and punishes your questions. The longer you stay within its walls, the more it whispers. Fit in, don't stand out. Follow the rules. Wait your turn. It rewards you for compliance and punishes you for curiosity, until one day, you can't tell the difference between who you are and what you were taught to be. This is the paradox of education. A system built to enlighten us ends up conditioning us to stay in the dark. But what if that darkness could be undone? What if you could unlearn the patterns that hold you back, see the invisible cage for what it really is, and walk out of it, free, awake, and alive? By the end of this video, you will see how deeply this conditioning runs, and more importantly, how to reclaim the mind that was yours before the system got to it. Because beneath the obedience, beneath the fear, beneath the years of quiet repetition, something in you is still awake. Something in you is still alive. So if you're someone who's passionate about philosophy, psychology, and awakening the hidden layers of your own mind, subscribe, like this video, and join this journey. Because once you see how the invisible machine works, you can never see the world the same way again. They told us school was about education, about preparing us for life, about teaching us how to think, how to grow, how to succeed. But if that were true, why do so many of us leave those halls feeling smaller, more uncertain, and more afraid to fail than when we entered? What if the real purpose of school was never about awakening your potential, but about taming it? Arthur Schopenhauer once said, "The greatest achievements of the human mind are often those it accomplishes in spite of, not because of, institutional education." He saw schools not as places of liberation, but of conformity, factories of sameness. Instead of nurturing the flame of individuality, they smother it under the weight of routine and repetition. From the moment we're taught to raise our hands to speak, to ask permission to move, to memorize what others have thought instead of exploring what we think, the system is already doing its job. It's not cultivating intelligence, it's conditioning obedience. Think about it. The school bell doesn't just signal the end of a class, it trains you to respond to authority. Grades don't just measure understanding, they measure compliance. Even the structure, rows of desks, identical schedules, standardized tests, all of it mirrors the industrial world that built it. It teaches you to show up on time, do what you're told, meet expectations, and repeat the process until it becomes your second nature. But here's the hidden cost. While you're being taught what to think, you're slowly forgetting how to think. While you're learning to follow, you're unlearning how to question. And the longer you stay in the system, the more distant your original curiosity becomes. That part of you that once wondered freely, that once sought meaning instead of approval. Schopenhauer believed true knowledge could never be mass-produced. It had to be earned, through reflection, solitude, and suffering. It had to be lived. But a system built for efficiency doesn't have time for that. It doesn't want deep thinkers. It wants predictable workers. And so the tragedy begins. Millions of minds trained not to awaken, but to adapt. From the very beginning, school teaches us a silent rule: don't stand out. Blend in, be agreeable, follow the pattern. And the moment you dare to step outside that invisible line, to question, to resist, to express, you feel the sting of correction. A red mark on your paper, a scolding in front of the class, a quiet message that says, it's safer to stay small. That is the first wound school inflicts upon us, the fear of individuality, the slow death of originality disguised as discipline. We start to believe that being different is dangerous, that the price of authenticity is isolation. We learn to shrink our ideas, soften our voice, and hide the parts of ourselves that don't fit neatly into the system's categories. And little by little, we trade truth for approval. But as Schopenhauer wrote, talent hits a target no one else can hit. Genius hits a target no one else can see. The tragedy is that most people never even get to aim. Because before we could ever see our target, the system blinded us with comparison. It taught us that worth comes from grades, that success means being better than someone else, that failure defines your intelligence. And so, we begin to measure ourselves by the wrong standards. The child who once painted the world in wild colors now fears coloring outside the lines. The one who asked too many questions learns to stay silent. The dreamer who saw possibilities becomes the realist who settles for expectations. And every time that happens, a spark goes out. This is not education. This is conditioning. Conditioning that rewards the obedient and quietly exiles the original. It replaces curiosity with caution and replaces exploration with fear. How many of us still carry that fear into adulthood? The fear of speaking our truth. The fear of being seen as strange. The fear of failing in public. But here's what no one told us. The fear of standing out is not your fear. It's the system's fear. The fear of losing control over minds that dare to think for themselves. The world needs the very people school taught to silence. Because it is the ones who stand apart who move humanity forward. Friedrich Nietzsche once said that systems of control survive not by strength, but by manufacturing weakness. When you look closely, you begin to see that school is not just an institution of learning. It is a training ground for obedience. It teaches you to depend on approval, to wait for instructions, to fear failure as if it were death itself. And once that conditioning takes hold, it follows you far beyond the classroom walls. Think about it. How many adults still ask for permission in invisible ways? How many seek validation from bosses, followers, or algorithms before trusting their own voice? The conditioning that began at a school desk becomes a lifelong pattern. We become excellent at performing roles, yet poor at knowing who we truly are beneath them. We learn how to follow rules, but not how to question them. We learn how to meet expectations, but not how to define them. Nietzsche believed that this was no accident. He saw education as a mechanism designed to tame the wildness of the human spirit, to mold the individual into something manageable, predictable, safe. He warned that society doesn't want thinkers, it wants servants, people who mistake structure for purpose and obedience for meaning. And the more obedient we become, the more disconnected we feel from the inner source of our own power. It's a subtle kind of slavery, one that doesn't chain your body but binds your mind. It convinces you that freedom lies in following the rules perfectly, rather than breaking them creatively. And because everyone around you is doing the same, it feels normal. We become a society of imitators, copying what has been rewarded, avoiding what has been punished. We wear masks of competence while inside, the self withers. Nietzsche saw this clearly. He called it herd morality, the death of individuality through the worship of sameness. And he warned that the cost of belonging to the herd is the loss of your own voice. Once you forget how to think for yourself, you stop asking the most important question of all: who am I, outside of what they taught me to be? But Nietzsche also believed that within every obedient soul sleeps a rebel, a creator, a thinker, a spirit that refuses to be tamed. The question is whether you're willing to wake it up. Imagine for a moment that you are not a person, but a product to be shaped, tested, and delivered into a system that values efficiency over creativity, obedience over originality. What would your upbringing look like? Bells to mark your shifts, uniforms to erase your individuality, rows of desks to ensure you never forget your place. You would be measured, compared, standardized, until every rough edge of your humanity was filed down to fit the mold. This isn't a dystopian fantasy. It's the very blueprint on which modern schooling was built. When the Industrial Revolution reshaped the world, education followed suit. Factories needed disciplined, punctual, and compliant workers, not visionaries, not philosophers, not dreamers. And so, schools were designed to produce what the machine demanded: predictability. The school bell mirrored the factory whistle. The timetable mirrored the assembly line. Students were divided by age, not by curiosity, processed in batches, not nurtured as individuals. And if you look closely, You can still see the traces of that design today. The bells that ring between classes, the tests that measure your conformity, the rigid subjects divided like conveyor belts of thought. Even the way students are rewarded for memorization, not understanding, for repetition, not originality. All of it reveals the same logic, efficiency above essence. Schopenhauer would have called this the factory of mediocrity. Nietzsche, the triumph of the herd over the individual. Both saw the same tragedy, a society that confuses discipline with development and productivity with purpose. The school system teaches you how to function, but not how to feel. It teaches you how to answer, but never how to ask. And the real cost isn't measured in test scores or report cards. It's measured in lost curiosity, in the quiet death of wonder, in the millions who walk into adulthood brilliant, capable, and utterly disconnected from themselves. The factory doesn't destroy intelligence, it redirects it. Away from creativity, toward compliance. Away from freedom, toward the illusion of success. But every now and then, a spark slips through the cracks, a student who dares to ask why, who refuses to accept that learning should feel lifeless. They are the ones who remind us that education was never meant to be mechanical. It was meant to be alive. The cost of conformity is invisible at first. It doesn't show up in your grades or your resume. It appears years later, in the quiet moments when you can no longer hear your own thoughts. It's in the hesitation before you speak your truth, the anxiety before you try something new, the constant sense that you're not enough, no matter how much you achieve. That's the price of being molded to fit a system instead of being nurtured to grow beyond it. For years, we were taught that good behavior equals success, that if we follow the rules, work hard, and wait our turn, we'll find happiness. But what happens when you follow all the rules and still feel empty? When you do everything right, yet something deep inside still whispers, "This isn't it?" That's when you start to realize the truth. School trained us to function, not to flourish. It built us to perform, not to be. How many people still carry the voice of a teacher in their mind, telling them they're not smart enough, not talented enough, not good enough? How many abandon their art, their curiosity, their wild ideas, because they didn't fit the grading rubric? These wounds don't vanish when you graduate. They sink deeper, shaping the way you see yourself for years to come. Nietzsche called this the death of authenticity. He saw modern life as a stage full of actors, people so conditioned to perform that they forget who they are when the curtain falls. And isn't that what school prepared us for? To play roles, to recite lines, to wear masks of competence, even when we feel lost inside. We became experts at achieving goals, but amateurs at finding meaning. We know how to please authority, but not how to listen to our own intuition. We chase titles and numbers, but rarely stop to ask why. And the result is a quiet epidemic of disconnection. A generation of people who appear successful, yet feel spiritually vacant. But here's the truth Nietzsche and Schopenhauer both understood. You cannot live a real life by following an artificial path. The longer you conform, the further you drift from the self that once burned with curiosity and courage. And every step toward conformity is a step away from authenticity. Yet, all it takes is one question, one moment of courage to turn back toward yourself. To say, maybe the system was never meant to define me. Maybe I was meant to define myself. Somewhere along the way, we forgot what education was ever meant to be. We confused information with wisdom, memorization with understanding, and conformity with intelligence. We turned a sacred process of awakening into a checklist of achievements. But long before classrooms and exams, education had a different name, paideia. In ancient Greece, it wasn't about producing workers or citizens. It was about shaping souls. Education then meant to lead the soul out of ignorance toward light. It included philosophy, poetry, art, ethics, and the pursuit of beauty. The goal was not to make you useful, but to make you whole, to awaken a sense of harmony between mind, body, and spirit. The teacher's job wasn't to fill you with answers, but to ignite your questions, to help you remember who you already were before the world told you what to become. Contrast that with today. Modern schooling teaches us to memorize facts we'll forget within weeks, to compete for grades that mean little beyond the paper they're printed on, and to measure our worth in numbers that never capture our depth. Instead of asking, "Who are you?" or "What do you love enough to suffer for?" the system asks, "What will you do to fit in?" Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But how can anyone become themselves in a system designed to make everyone the same? The moment you step into school, you're told what success looks like, what failure feels like, what to dream, and what not to dare. And slowly, you stop listening to your inner voice, the one that knows your path before any syllabus could define it. True education is not the memorization of other people's thoughts. It's the cultivation of your own. It's not about filling the mind. It's about expanding consciousness. It's not about passing tests. It's about testing what you've been told to passively believe. It's about confronting the parts of life that can't be graded: love, loss, beauty, fear, and meaning. We lost that somewhere. We replaced wisdom with data, purpose with productivity, and reflection with distraction. But deep down, that ancient hunger remains, the hunger to know not just the world, but ourselves. And no institution, no system, can ever fully erase that instinct. It waits quietly in every one of us, ready to awaken the moment we stop seeking permission to be who we already are. At some point, we must look in the mirror and ask, who am I beneath all this conditioning? Who would I be if I had never been graded, compared, or told who to become? Because the truth is, what school calls education often leaves behind invisible scars, a quiet disconnection from the deepest parts of ourselves. We grow up thinking we've outgrown school, but its lessons still live within us. The need to please, the fear of being wrong, the instinct to hide our real thoughts behind what's acceptable. Carl Jung called this the creation of the shadow, the parts of ourselves we were told to suppress. Our curiosity, our wildness, our imagination, our anger, our sensitivity, all exiled because they didn't fit the system's narrow definition of success. But what's repressed doesn't disappear. It waits. It waits beneath the surface, whispering through dreams, emotions, and longing. It waits for you to come back and reclaim it. That reclamation, that remembering, is where true awakening begins. To reclaim the self, you must be willing to meet the child who still lives within you. The one who once asked too many questions, who wanted to sing, to build, to explore without fear of being wrong. That child was never naive. They were free. And if you listen closely, you'll realize they're still there, buried beneath years of silence and self-doubt. Reclaiming yourself means breaking the spell of other people's definitions. It means no longer living according to the grades, labels, or judgments that once defined your worth. It's about turning inward and realizing that the real education begins only after unlearning. Because the system taught you to look outward for validation, but your soul has been waiting for you to look inward for truth. It will not be comfortable. It will feel like standing in the dark without a map, but that darkness is sacred. It's where real learning begins. Jung said that the process of becoming whole often requires descending into the depths, meeting your own shadow, and saying, "I see you. You're part of me too." Reclaiming the self is not about rebellion for its own sake. It's about remembering what was lost. It's about choosing authenticity over approval, curiosity over comfort, and truth over performance. Because the moment you begin to remember who you are, the system that shaped you starts to lose its power. Now that you've seen how the system shapes you and how it silences you, the question becomes, how do you break free from it? How do you reclaim your mind after years of conditioning? The answer isn't found in another classroom or textbook. It begins in solitude, in silence, in the spaces where your own voice can finally be heard again. Arthur Schopenhauer believed solitude was not loneliness, but liberation. It was the sacred ground where the noise of the world faded, and the truth of the self could finally emerge. He would walk alone for hours, letting thought and emotion untangle themselves, until clarity appeared not as something taught, but as something remembered. In solitude, you begin to rediscover the rhythm of your own mind, a rhythm that has been drowned out by years of external direction. Nietzsche took this even further. He warned, "He who cannot obey himself will be commanded," meaning, if you cannot trust your own voice, someone else will gladly speak for you. The essence of liberation, he said, is self-command, the ability to follow your own instincts even when they lead you away from the crowd. To think freely, you must be willing to walk alone. But solitude is only the beginning. The next step is meaning, what Viktor Frankl called logotherapy. Frankl, who endured the unimaginable suffering of the Holocaust, discovered that those who survived were not necessarily the strongest, but those who had a why, a reason to endure, a purpose to live for. And that why cannot be given to you, it must be forged. It's not found in comfort, but in the moments of suffering that demand you choose who you are. Ask yourself, what gives your life meaning? Not what makes you look successful, not what earns praise, but what makes you feel alive even when it hurts. That's where your why lives. That's where freedom begins. And finally, there's one more tool, one that modern education neglected entirely: the reconnection between mind and body, thought and instinct. For too long, school taught us to live in our heads, as if the body and the soul were irrelevant. But Nietzsche understood the opposite, that the will to power, the drive to create and live fully, comes from embodiment, from vitality, from being fully alive in every cell of your being. So, to reclaim your mind, you must also reclaim your body. Breathe deeper, move freely, listen to what excites you, and trust what drains you. Education taught you to analyze life. Liberation teaches you to feel it. And above all, give yourself permission. Permission to be wrong, to change, to start again. The system taught you to fear mistakes, but mistakes are the raw material of evolution. You are not behind. You are becoming. You've spent your life being told what to learn, how to think, and who to become. But here's the revelation Schopenhauer and Nietzsche both understood. You were never meant to fit into the system. You were meant to outgrow it. The system's purpose was never to make you whole. It was to make you manageable. But beneath that conditioning, beyond the years of quiet conformity, something in you never surrendered. That spark, that hunger to know, to create, to be, it's still there, waiting for you to return. Nietzsche called this return the birth of the Übermensch, not a superior human, but a self-created one. The Übermensch is the person who dares to destroy illusion, who refuses to inherit meaning and instead creates it. The one who stops asking, "What should I do?" and begins asking, "What is true for me?" It's not rebellion for its own sake. It's liberation through self-creation. Schopenhauer saw freedom differently, but toward the same end. For him, liberation came through awareness, through piercing the veil of the world's delusions and seeing life as it is, not as we were trained to see it. He believed that wisdom begins when we stop running from suffering and start learning from it. Because pain, when faced with clarity, becomes transformation. And that's what this final truth demands: to stop running, to face the beliefs, fears, and expectations that were never yours, and to let them burn away. To realize that the voice saying, "You re not enough," was never yours to begin with. It was given to you, rehearsed into you, repeated until you believed it. But it can be unlearned. You can become your own teacher now, your own philosopher, your own creator. You can read not to pass exams, but to awaken your soul. You can learn from solitude, from silence, from failure, from love, from beauty. You can let life itself educate you, not through grades, but through growth. Because here is the truth the system never taught you. School ends, but education doesn't. Education, in its purest form, is life itself, the unfolding of your consciousness as you walk through uncertainty, fall, rise, and keep becoming. Nietzsche said, "Become who you are." That is your only real assignment now. Not from a teacher, not from an institution, but from life itself. And you cannot fail it, unless you refuse to begin. So start. Question what you've been taught. Seek what sets your soul on fire. Walk into spaces where no one claps, but your spirit feels alive. Let your education be wild, unpredictable, and beautifully your own. You are not broken. You were never broken. You were only buried beneath expectations, and now you rise.